It's really, really special to be here this morning. So thank you, first of all, to Sanya and her team at KVA and to Volunteering Kingston for organising this event. It's so important, I think, to celebrate the success of the last year, but equally important to learn from it. And what a year it's been. I think for everybody, a tough year right across the country, let alone in our little corner of it, and a memorable year. Some people say that they feel that their lives have been suspended for the year, but for others it's been much harder than that. They've suffered loss, they've suffered ill health, and for many people we know in our borough, they've suffered financial loss. We know, for instance, that the number of people claiming universal credit has tripled in the last year, and we fear that many more people might lose their jobs when the furlough scheme eventually comes to a close. And all we know at the moment is that that will happen in the summer, but we don't know specifically when it will happen. We talk as a council in our collective, in our corporate plan, about being a resilient borough. And the past year has certainly tested that resilience. But if this period has been challenging, I think it's probably been the most challenging for the people who are in this meeting today, because this is, as Sanya said, where community power really stepped up, really established itself and showed its muscle. Helping our most vulnerable residents is, for some of you, your bread and butter anyway. But at the point where the need was most acute and most widespread, you really stepped up, and all I can say is thank you. You've proved your mettle again and again. In the early days of the crisis, in March of last year, I think there was a really widespread desire to help people. Suddenly everybody seemed galvanized to help their neighbours and to help their fellow citizens. And I think it touched something really deep inside us, the need to be part of a community. I was thinking about the way, we all know how estate agents love to attach the word village to any area in London, whether it's anything resembling a village or not. But it's part of that. They know that people want to be part of a community. They want to be part of their local area. And this time last year, there was a moment in our borough where that need really rose to the surface. Some of my more seasoned political colleagues have said to me, wonderful as that moment is, it's really, really hard to hold on to it. And the leader of Sutton Council, who's been around a lot longer than I have, said that in Sutton, they really felt that they had captured something brilliant at the time of the Olympics, when people really, again, wanted to help and everybody was volunteering. And though they worked really hard, they didn't feel that they really captured that enthusiasm and held on to it once that moment had passed and we'd moved on to the next thing. Now, we knew that this was going to be a challenge, and we were determined to try to find out what we could learn from this and how we could somehow not just see it as a flash in the pan, a moment in history, but something that changes the way we work together. Yesterday, I was at the mayor making ceremony. It's an annual event as one mayor moves on and the other one takes over. But the outgoing mayor said that she'd spent, in fact, 2 years, because of COVID, she'd ended up being mayor for 2 years. But the beginning out in the community and in the second year, mostly on Zoom, she'd spent her time meeting the very best of what our borough does, of the people in our borough, the best of humanity, actually, people who represent the best of all of us. And I think that's who you are on the front line, day in, day out. And we are so grateful for what you do. I know that this is where brilliant ideas spring from, and this is where kindness is enacted day in, day out. At the council, we're really keen to seize the moment, to try to hold on to what was so special a year ago. We want to enable and empower our community groups. We know that we can't do it all, so we need you. We commissioned a report this time last year by an organisation called New Local to kind of look into how we could find recommendations to work better in future, to work in that more collaborative way that Sanya has already mentioned. So this is for us a work in progress, but we're very committed to it. But for now, I just really want to say thank you. Thank you for stepping up in the past year, but also for making our borough a place that we can be proud to live in. We called our community hubs Kingston Stronger Together, and I never tire of those words because I really think they're true. So thank you. And Ian, would you like to say something?
Thank you, Leader. And, everything you've said, I absolutely endorse and agree with. And, the leader and I spend a lot of time together having conversations about our various challenges. And we often talk about the voluntary sector, but we talk about you with fondness because of the value that the leader has outlined. In the 1960s, volunteering was seen as a way of diverting youthful energy away from mods and rockers gang feuds. In the 1970s, the emphasis was on professionalizing volunteer effort as a reliable appendage to social services. And there's that distinction, isn't there, between volunteering and the voluntary sector. And I've not said that because I'm at all clever. I got that from a Guardian article that was written in response to David Cameron's Big Society, for those that will recall that. And where the former Prime Minister was correct was in the principle that the sector is invaluable, the lifeblood of our communities. But where he was incorrect is that the sector could fill the gap created by austerity for a prolonged period of time. So the voluntary sector enriches, it adds value, has a role to play in reducing demand for statutory local authority intervention, but never a replacement. And I think that's why ultimately the big society failed. Throughout my whole career, I have worked in, relied upon, and loved the sector, working for two major charities myself, including Shelter, and being the trustee of another. Examples of a senior council leader I can draw on include in Trafford, where we had a real issue with supporting African Caribbean elders and elders from South Asia. And it was the voluntary sector that stepped in to provide those culturally appropriate meals as part of our commissioning program. In Derbyshire, a place that is huge, it's 1,000 square feet, a population of around 800,000. There's a vibrant sector there, but very, very complex. So you can imagine with a place that big, how complex the sector is. And we worked very closely on developing what's called a social impact bond to improve outcomes for young people at the risk of being NEET, not in education, employment or training. Some of you will know that I worked in Rotherham on the Rotherham turnaround, and part of that success was the council, something that I was leading on. We commissioned services to support 1,200 survivors of child sexual exploitation. These women were still suffering trauma all those years on, which is no surprise to me given my understanding of the profession, but there was a huge gap there and the council couldn't fill it. There was no service in place. So we worked with the voluntary sector to provide support to the Rotherham survivors. And also they were absolutely critical to supporting all of the witnesses that had to endure a grueling criminal justice system process. You know, to have the courage and what our new mayor referred to yesterday as fortitude to face your abuser in court requires exceptional support outside of court, with childcare, with emotional support, hand-holding. And it was the voluntary sector that worked with my social workers to ensure that those convictions were secured. My dad, and this is a personal reflection, he's 83. He's so sharp due to the support he receives from the voluntary sector because he has someone to play dominoes with as part of their social prescribing offer. And he's brilliant. He beats me. Um, they are proving that the voluntary sector, and this is what we see every day, the voluntary sector can reach parts that the council cannot reach. Unfortunately for my dad, not in the same way as Heineken Lager, for those who can remember the adverts, but they certainly reach the parts the council cannot reach. When I first started here in Kingston, Councillor Liz Green made it abundantly clear that the voluntary sector were an important part of the Kingston social policy infrastructure. And she knew, me having gone through the process, that she was knocking at an open door when asking me to prioritise collaboration with you all. Councillor Kerr, I'm pleased to say, is of the same opinion, that you play, and as you've heard, you play a significant part in our society. And as we emerge out of this awful pandemic, you are critical to Kingston's success going forward. The leader eloquently describes how we are concerned about job losses. We are concerned about the impact on families. We are concerned about the links between what's happening with the economy and what is happening to people. And the leader and her team are forging ahead with making those links to ensure that we mitigate ourselves from the worst of the economic shock. The pandemic has exemplified the value of our great partnership, from the provision of food, prescriptions, through to befriending or just checking in. Together we have supported thousands across our communities and ultimately saved thousands of lives. So looking ahead, we know our challenges are multivarious: deepening health and economic inequalities affecting women, young people, poorer people, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic people, and those with disabilities the most, whilst keeping a sharp focus on mental health, emotional health and well-being, as none of us are impervious to the poor mental health, irrespective of our economic standing or postcode, actually. In addressing all of this, I have to tell you that the council's financial position is precarious. London councils report a £500 million shortfall in funding for London councils, London local government last year. The Royal Borough of Kingston receives no revenue support grant. We rely heavily on business rates, which is very volatile at the moment, as one can understand, council tax, fees and charges, and therefore we need to ensure that our use of resources is judicious. So, as the leader has said, I wanted to say a heartfelt thank you to all of you for all that you have done, and in advance for working together to address the many challenges ahead. And thanks for giving us both a platform to speak to you today. It's been an honour and a privilege. Thank you.